is another case that I would title the exact same thing. I started researching this case and ended up realizing that the perpetrator hadn't just murdered one person, but three. Technically, that makes him a serial killer. Realistically, maybe not as prolific as some of the names that we do know and are familiar with the stories of. But I'm going to tell you about Dellen Millard tonight. And the more I learned about this guy, the more I really didn't like him very much. Dellen was born August 30th, 1985, to Wayne Millard and Madeline Burns. His father, Wayne, was a pilot who had worked for both Air Canada and a company called Millard Air. And that was an aviation firm founded by his father, Carl. So Millard Air is probably what it's supposed to be, but they don't capitalize the A, so I probably pronounced it incorrectly, as I am apt to do. Madeline was a flight attendant for Air Canada when the two met, and Dellen grew up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, the only child of his very wealthy parents. Dellen Millard was a man who liked the fast life. At age 14, he set a record by becoming the youngest Canadian to fly solo a helicopter and an airplane on the same day. By age 27, he would own several million-dollar properties and a fleet of luxury cars. He spent his days working for his father, Wayne, and on the weekends hosted pool parties in his luxurious mansion in a town I cannot pronounce, and he enjoyed off-road racing. Etobicoke. Yeah, I'm so bad with names, guys, sorry. Alright, so even though Dellen's potential was bright, he really chased the thrill of living dangerously. He dropped out of college, started doing drugs. Then, of course, that progressed to harder and harder drugs. Dellen would throw these lavish parties, and he would fund them with drugs and alcohol. And his lifestyle attracted people who wanted to live that gangsta life. His seemingly breezy existence was not without its dark spots, of course. His parents divorced when he was a teenager, and in November of 2012, his father was found dead of an apparent suicide. He carried some great sadness with him throughout his life that I never knew. He never wanted to share that with me, Dellen told police after his father's death. So he's living this grand life, throwing these lavish parties, drug parties, and this is where he meets a guy named Smidge. Smidge is a self-declared thug and wannabe rapper with some pretty terrible lyrics I'm not even going to bore you with. Mark was born August 13th, 1987. Unlike Dellen, Mark's parents were middle class, and Mark had a police record that involved petty offenses such as drug possession, driving while impaired, mischief, failure to appear in court, and breach of conditions. Mark sold drugs and cigarettes for a living, and he occasionally worked odd jobs at the Millards Who steals trees? What? Dell would commit these petty criminal offenses just for the fun of it because he thought he was above the law and he would never get caught. Well, that's your first sign. The hangar at the aviation repair business that his father owned was full of Dellen's toys. Cars, watercraft, equipment, motorcycles, most of these items stolen. Dellen then started dealing drugs himself and even filmed some racy videos in his family's aircraft. Yeah. But Dell's Playboy persona came crashing down on May 14th of 2013 when he was charged with first-degree murder in the death of a man named Bosma, a total stranger. And soon, Dellen Millard found himself facing not one, not two, but 3 separate first-degree murder trials for the deaths of Bosma, his ex-girlfriend Laura Babcock, and his own father, Wayne. I started researching this case, looking up Bosma. I had heard about his case prior, and I remember the press conference that his wife did. So I'm going to start this by telling you about Tim, because, well, I'll explain later, but it didn't happen first, but it is what got Dellen caught. So I'm going to start with Tim, and then I'll backtrack a little. 32-year-old Bosma was a Canadian citizen from Ancaster, a small community within the city of Hamilton, Ontario. He was a family man, and he had decided to sell his diesel truck, and his wife Charlene had posted an ad online. Tim was a father, a contractor, and he was described as an all-around good guy. The Bosmas had a 2-year-old daughter, and they had recently decided to grow their family even more. Money was tight, and getting rid of this truck would ease some of their financial burdens. On May 6th of 2013, Dellen and his awesome friend Mark arrived at the Bosma family home to take the truck for a test drive. At first it seemed kind of strange because they arrived on foot, and it was just after 9:20 p.m., so it was dark out. They told Charlene, Tim's wife, that they had been dropped off by a friend. Tim had asked Charlene, well, when they show up, should I go with them? And she said, yes, you should, because we want the truck to come back. Unfortunately, Tim went with these men, and he was never seen again. When he did not respond to her many texts and voicemails, Charlene reported her husband missing. A social media campaign was launched, and soon an entire community was out looking for him. The Hamilton Police Service treated this case as a missing persons investigation with unusual circumstances. They conducted a ground search of the area around the Bosma home with canine units and a local search and rescue team. And then they held a press briefing, the one I mentioned before, on May 7th. Police quickly discovered that the phone that had been used to contact him had been a burner phone. On May 9th, Tim's deactivated cell phone was found in an industrial area on the west side of nearby Brantford, Ontario. Using the call records from the burner phone, the police discovered that the men had arranged 2 other test drives in similar vehicles in the days preceding Tim Bosma's murder. The 2 failed to arrive on time for the first, so it never occurred. I hate it when that happens. safe return. It was just a truck, a stupid truck, she said. You don't need him, but I do. Our daughter needs her daddy. 4 days later, they found Tim Bosma's truck in a trailer on the property of Dellen, Millard's mother. The truck had been stripped, but gunshot residue and traces of Tim's blood were found inside. Now, it's not exactly revealed how this was found, but human remains were later found. This just horrifies me, so that's why I mess up. In an incinerator on the Millard family farm. They were too charred to be identifiable by their DNA. At this point, Dellen Millard is charged with first-degree murder in the death of Tim Bosma. Shortly after his arrest, police began to look into 2 other unsettling cases that shared one thing in common: Dellen Millard. So now I'm going to backtrack just a little and tell you about the first case that was tied to Dellen. His ex-girlfriend Laura Babcock went missing in July of 2012. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Laura led a pretty troubled life. That summer, she was fighting with her parents over house rules, and she was kind of couch surfing from friend to friend. Laura was an aspiring actress with a bubbly personality. She became attracted to the bad boy image that I feel like we've all been attracted to at one point in our lives, even if we knew better, that Dell Millard presented. She really had a difficult time making ends meet after graduating from college, and I read that she had a history of anxiety and depression. After speaking with a friend from college about her money issues, Laura was introduced to the world of escorting. Laura and Dellen initially had a casual relationship, and they were really only together about a month, but they stayed friends after their relationship ended. Laura then met a guy named, oh my gosh, I keep bumping this thing, I'm so sorry, a guy named Shauna. Shawn was like the polar opposite of Dell. Where Dell was the bad boy, Shawn was a good man in every aspect, and he fell straight in love with Laura. Eventually, though, they split up, but they remained friends as well. And Shawn often helped Laura with a place to stay. She was going through that rough patch. He even helped her find a hotel that was pet-friendly so that she could keep her dog with her. He paid the bill for her, and he even gave her an expensive iPad as a gift. Now, as I mentioned, Laura stayed friends with Dell, and Dell at this point had a new girlfriend that Laura did not get along with, a woman named Christina Nukta. And quite the feud developed between these two, and it pretty was huge. It had 7,000-pound axles on it, and it must have weighed like 10,000 pounds according to the description. At this time, Dell also purchases a .32 caliber handgun from a Toronto arms dealer. In July of 2012, Dell and Laura meet up, and cell phone data shows that they went to Dell's house. After this, Laura never uses her phone again. Right after Laura's last phone call, she checked her voicemail at 7:03. Dellen texts Mark and he says, "I'm on a mission. Be back in 1 hour." Remember that missions were their secret code for illegal things. On July 2nd, Laura's iPad that Sean gave her is connected to Dellen's computer, and it's renamed Mark's iPad. That afternoon, a photo is saved to Dellen's phone that shows something that looks like a body wrapped in a blue tarp next to Dellen's dog. Like, how creepy do you have to be? The next day, Dellen takes the delivery of the industrial-size incinerator that he ordered. On July 23rd, he texts Mark and he says, "Barbecue run had its warm-up. It's ready for meat." Anyway, let's just say this guy's a creep and move on. Later on Dell's computer, they find out that he searched for what temperature is needed for cremation of a body. And a short while later, he takes a picture of Mark with the incinerator rake, followed by a video of sparks coming from the incinerator. The next day, Mark records a rap song on Laura's iPad about her death and how they burned the body in the incinerator and threw her phone in the lake. A couple of the lyrics to this song that he recorded kind of went like this. "The bee started off all skin and bone. Now the bee lay on some ash and stone. The last time I saw her, I was outside her home. If you go swimming, you can find her phone." I told you he was a stellar lyric writer. 3 days later, after being unable to reach Laura, her friend Sean contacts the police to report her missing. But he pretty much hit a brick wall. Police said she lived a high-risk lifestyle, and because of her mental issues and the fact that she worked as an escort, they refused to take the missing person fiancé was charged with his father's murder. After being convicted of Tim Bosma's murder in 2016 and facing another expensive trial for Laura Babcock's murder, Dellen Millard claimed he was broke. He owned millions of dollars in property, but he transferred most of this to his mother after his arrest. He was then denied legal aid by the judge and decided to take the unusual step of representing himself in court. And that is how, on the first day of trial, he found himself standing across from Laura Babcock's father, asking him what he knew about his daughter's life. "This can't be easy for you," he said, "being questioned by me. Considering I'm the one who's accused, does that make it extra difficult?" Like, oh, you're so arrogant. Mr. Babcock stood his ground and he said no. He was determined to get through this exchange without provoking Dellen further. Now, I just don't really, obviously he was convicted, and then he went to trial for his father's murder. I kind of wish they'd wrapped it all up into one, so he couldn't have the show, I guess, of being his own lawyer. All I see is Ted Bundy acting like an idiot in court. So, during the trial for his father's murder, the court heard about how Dellen wanted nothing to do with his father's new business venture, an aeroplane maintenance and repair business. The elder Millard hoped that it would revive the family legacy. Dellen said, "The last time I spoke to my father, I told him the company's financial troubles were his doing and that he was a failure." Can you imagine telling your own father that you thought he was a failure? Usually, Wayne would tell him not to worry, but Dellen says that this time, Wayne said maybe he was right. The night of his father's death, Dellen said that he was at Mark's house, but Dellen had been the one that discovered his father's body the next morning. Instead of immediately calling 911, he called his mother, who had been divorced from his father for almost a decade. Dellen was the one who told the police about his father's depressive mood, but phone records revealed he had traveled back to the house, hours before he said he had found his father's body. A gun purchased illegally by Dellen was found next to his father, with Dellen's DNA on it. On Monday, it was July 22nd, 2017, after the verdict was read and Dellen was declared a 3-time murderer. The father of Laura Babcock addressed reporters outside the courtroom and said, "It has been proven that not only the Bosmas and ourselves lost a loved one, but the Millard family must live with the fact that this heinous individual murdered his own father. We feel for Wayne's relatives, except for one." Now, I kind of did a little, aftermath on this because there were just some details that didn't really fit in the story, but the first is both Dellen and Mark were convicted of first-degree murder. They were given 2 consecutive life sentences for the deaths of Laura Babcock and Tim Bosma. Dellen still awaits sentencing for his father's death. Prosecutors will likely ask for another life sentence. Canadian law forbids criminals from profiting from their crime. Since being convicted of his father's death, it's quite likely that Dellen will be disinherited. And it remains unclear what that means for the lawsuits filed by the Babcock and Bosma families. I did read some information that his girlfriend, Christina Nubda, she was charged because apparently, and I man murdered for a drug on test drive or something ridiculous like that in order to discover this case. So thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoy it. By the time you're watching this, I will be in Florida on vacation. But don't worry, you'll have content this week. I think that Sean is going to film the midweek video. I am going to film some kind of something for Patreon. I did a true crime video there earlier this week, so maybe I'll do a ramble like Stephanie requested. I don't know yet, but thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being here, and please tell me in the comments down below if you knew about Dellen or Millard and what you think of this absolutely bananas case. Do you think he should have gotten more than a first-degree murder charge, 2 first-degree murder charges, and a life sentence? Do you think the death penalty should have been on the table? I don't really know what I think, but I think it kind of sucks that he's just sitting